Welcome, Bill, to the Team Leader Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. How are things going for you?
It's going well, and thanks for having me. I think this is such an honor, Lucas, and I love the cool things that you're doing. It was cool that we got to connect at the Nebraska Solo Training, and love that you're doing this.
Thank you. So can you explain a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and maybe give a little brief story that kind of defines you as a person?
Well, I've been a professional speaker for 30 years, and that has afforded me the opportunities to do things beyond my wildest dreams of, keynoting for large groups and doing state officer trainings and working with mostly working in schools. So it's my passion. It's the thing that I love doing the most. And I think the thing that I want your listeners to understand, that everything that we do is about time. And a few years ago, I have this passion for golf, and my son and I want to golf in all 50 states. And he was like, "Dad, when are we going to do? We want to take a trip." And so we kind of lined things out that we were going to golf 7 states, and we were just going to get in the truck and we were just going to drive. And he was so excited about it, and he kept bugging me. He's like, "Dad, when are we going to go?" And I'm like, "We're going to go tomorrow." And so we kind of got things. "Dad, when are we going to go?" And I said, we're going to go. And so about 3 o'clock rolls around. I said, "We're going now." And he said, "It's about time." And I said, "Yeah, I know, I get it, dude. It's about time." He goes, "No, Dad, it's about time." And when he said it, my brain kind of exploded, because he was just saying that the trip is about time, and it's about how we spend the time. And I looked at him, I said, "You are so right, Easton. All of this is about time. It's about you and I being together. It's about hanging out, and it is about time." I think so many times we hear the phrase, "It's about time," and as people saying impatient with us, "Hey, it's about time you showed up. It's about time you did it right." And all Easton was saying was, it's about time, that this trip is about time. And so, Lucas, our trip, our time here is about time. And I'm so thankful for your listeners to investing the time into the podcast. And what we invest our time in is the difference that makes the difference with all of us. And so glad to be here. And hey, this is all about time, man.
Yeah, definitely. I love that story. Talking about time, at least right now, we're kind of all taking a few steps back in our life and kind of reflecting on what we've been experiencing like throughout our whole life, and slowing down and getting to spend more time with friends and family, like you said. What would you say moving forward out of this virus and isolation that we have? What would you say to those leaders and teenagers out there moving forward now that they've had time to reflect and kind of see what a bit of a break and slowing down can do for them? What would you say to them?
I would say start investing right now. I mean, this is the perfect time to start investing. When the very first thing that I thought of when I looked on the landscape of what was coming, and of course, like a lot of speakers, my calendar emptied up, and I started thinking, what am I going to do? I can either sit around, I can binge on Netflix, or I can worry, or I can invest. And right away we started investing. We created the Muse movement, and which I think you've seen some videos off the Muse movement. And we didn't do the Muse movement as a thing like, hey, this is a way to make money, or we did it as a way to just for us to be able to give something back, and for us to have something to do, and for us to create material. And the second thing that we did was we just a startup company, a fundraising company that we're investing. So my advice to anybody is, what we have in front of us right now is we have amazing technology. And you and I are doing this right now, amazing technology. We've all gotten better with our Zoom skills. We've all gotten better with technology. And so what can we do right now to invest so that on the other side of this, that we're better? And that's my advice for anybody at any time, is invest right now. Don't wait. Hey, when things get better. I think so many times people get caught in this idea of, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when the virus is over. I'll be happy when we can go back to school at regular times. I'll be happy when I grow up. I'll be happy when I get older. I'll be happy when I get a job, only to discover that when we get to that place, all we're trying to do is figure out when I'll be happy next. Well, let's do it now. Let's be the person that we want to be now. Why wait? Yeah.
That's great. So we kind of talked about investing right now and how that applies to any point in your life. And you can invest in your skills, you can invest in knowledge by reading and learning with all the resources that we have available. Can we talk about investing in people? And one of the things that I've learned from you over the time we've known each other is the importance of investing in others and those around us by getting to know them on a much deeper level. Can we talk about how you really need to understand someone before you can not judge them, but just be able to work with them better and get more out of that relationship?
I think the biggest thing is to really, really listen, to listen and to be being present with other people. If you listen to people, they're going to tell you what they need, and then having that ability to listen and then to respond to those needs, and the getting the things that separate us out of our way, whether it's conflicts of the past or whether it's technology, and taking that time to really connect with people. And when you ask a question, is to really, really listen to their responses, not from a place of, oh, I've heard that already, but I haven't heard it from you. And so I think the biggest, everybody, we talked about it in the training, is that people will always remember the way you made them feel. And that's a Maya Angelou quote. And so when we walk into a situation, I think we walk in with the intention of going, how do I want to feel about this interaction when it's all over? And how do I want to feel about this person? How do I want this person to feel about me? And what can I do today? Whether it's like today, I was at Home Depot and I was sitting in some different chairs, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, if you sit in it, you got to buy it." And of course, he was kidding, but I appreciated the interaction. So it was an opening for me to just say, "Hey, what's up? What's going on with you? How you been?" And so we started talking. So let me show you where that is. And so he took me down, and it was a simple interaction, but we were both lighthearted about it, and we both walked away from the interaction going, yeah, that's kind of fun. It was cool. We laughed a little bit, and it was good. So, taking advantage of moments, maybe something like that. Yeah.
I love that story. And I had this brought up later to bring up later in the podcast, but we're just going to bring it up now.
Okay.
You have an acronym MMFI, and this is something that I have used so many times, and I love it. Make me feel important. And you kind of touched on that just briefly. Can you dive deeper into that acronym and how that applies to teenagers in today's world?
Not just teenagers, Lucas, but everybody is the MMFI, that when we move through our lives, that we imagine that everybody that we meet has 4 letters permanently tattooed to their forehead, and those 4 letters are MMFI. And those 4 letters stand for make me feel important. And it's amazing how many times we want other people to make us feel important, but we're doing nothing. We're investing, back to the word investing, we're investing nothing into them, into making them feel important. We don't have to do much, right? We don't have to do a ton of stuff. If we just stop and we make eye contact and we ask them questions about what's going on with them, and taking the time to make somebody else feel like they matter, feel like they're valuable. And I can't take credit for the MMFI thing. I saw in a book probably, I don't know, Lucas, maybe 30 years ago. And it was a kindergarten teacher talking about, she said, all I do is every time when my kids walk in is that I imagine they have 4 letters tattooed to their forehead, regardless of what they ask me, regardless of what kind of day I'm having. I just want to stop and I want to make that person feel important. MMFI. Yeah, it's a great little thing to keep in the back of your mind. So when somebody's upset with you or somebody's cross with you, what can you do right now to make them feel important? Yeah.
Did you have someone in your life, a mentor or a teacher or a coach, that made you really feel important and it kind of clicked for you at that moment?
Yes. Yes. I was in college, and I went to college for a long time. I was 7.5 years in college. Towards the end of my college career, I met a woman, Delorese Gregoire from Hawaii. I was doing, I'd mentioned it to a friend of mine. I said, I really want to work with teenagers. That's my passion in life. And at that time, I didn't know about being a speaker. I didn't know that was a career, it was a job or anything like that. And they said, well, if you want to work with teenagers, there's this great program. My son did it. It's called Winter's Camp, and you should go. And she gave me her phone number, and I called her up, and Delorese said, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. And I went to her office, and we did a little interview. And afterwards she said, I would love to have you come and work at Winter's Camp and be a team leader with us. And you would be a great role model for teenagers. And it sounds almost, how could that short phrase change my life? But it did. She said, you could be a great role model for teenagers. And that phrase filled my heart. And nobody had ever said that to me like that, in that way. And maybe it wasn't the words. Of course, we know that most of what we communicate is not in the words that we use, but it's in how it's on all the extra stuff that goes with it. And it's the tonality, and it's the way she was with me. And it just sunk in, and it sunk in. And I thought, yeah, I could be a great role model for teenagers. And I have spent the last 30 years fulfilling what her expectation of me to the world. And yeah, she's still my mentor. She's still someone that I communicate with on a regular basis. And all my kids have gone to Winter's Camp, and I've been back and staffed it many times, and I spoke at camp many times. And so it's just a great experience for me. Yeah.
So it's clear that she definitely gave you some motivation and truly believed in you as a person, and maybe even saw more in yourself than you saw in yourself. So, what other qualities did she demonstrate as a leader that you really saw and took interest in that she demonstrated so well?
I'm glad that you asked that, because that was the first interaction. And what makes her a great mentor is what has followed up after that. And she's completely rigorous. First, I was a team leader, and I went to camp, and she would coach me and talk to me about, this is how to be with people, and this is how to create small groups, and this is how to create good interaction within your small group, and this is how to treat people well. And so she was always on me about being on purpose. And that word rigorous, I use it intentionally because she used it with me. Is she was very, very rigorous in her feedback with me, always honest, never brutally honest, always there as a coach, always there to teach. And when those teachable moments would come up, she would be there for me. And even so, I went from being a team leader at camp to being a facilitator at camp to actually being on stage and working with teenagers. And so when I would get done, she would ask, are you ready for feedback? And her thing was, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And so if I was ready for feedback, she would give it to me, and I would write it down. I had a journal, and I write down the things, the adjustments that I would need to make. And it wasn't always about being nice, although she was kind in her approach, but it was all about, giving me feedback when I was ready to hear it, and then me making the adjustments. And when I made the adjustments, acknowledging me for the adjustments that I made. So it's that constant coaching process along the way that I think is the difference that makes a difference. So for all teenagers, for all people, have a mentor who will give you rigorous feedback. Not just say, hey, Lucas, you're amazing, but also have that kind of relationship with them that they can give you feedback, you can listen, and then you can make adjustments along the way.
Billy kind of talked about, through your time in college and working at this camp with your mentor, you kind of talked about progressing in those stages to different titles, I guess you'd say, kind of leveling up along the way. And you've probably done that throughout your whole life. And most people kind of do go through those stage progressions. And for teens starting out, it's sometimes a daunting task, knowing that you don't have a title behind your name. And it can kind of be like, oh, I can't lead others because I don't have that title. They're not going to follow me. And it's evident that you may have thought that, but you definitely took actions against that thought. Can you explain more about how that title is not necessarily the most important thing to leaders?
It's really not, because you're going to be the same person when you have the title, when you don't have the title. Great leaders are also great followers. End of story, right? It's so if you're a great follower, you are laying the foundation to be a better leader. So the titles are titles are they're irrelevant. It's who am I today, and who am I, how do I treat others today, how am I giving respect today. And those are the kinds of things that will develop quality, meaningful relationships when you are interacting with others regardless of your title. And treat always, what was the, oh, trying to think of, there was a, I saw somebody at a DECA conference, and he was a CEO, and he said always treat people up, right? Meaning always treat everybody like they're somebody. Treat everybody like they are the CEO, like they are the most important person in the world, because you don't really know. The biggest mistake we make as a teenager, I think, is to assume that everybody around us is a bunch of teenagers, right? Well, if we treat people as they are becoming, if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of teenagers, you're sitting in the room with doctors and lawyers and politicians and, you know, people who are going to have an amazing impact on the world. And so, you know, your title doesn't matter. It's how you treat people right here, right now, in that moment. Does that answer your question?
Definitely, definitely. You said great leaders are just as well great followers. And can we talk about how being a follower, the difference between being a follower to copy someone and kind of
Mm.
follow in their footsteps, as opposed to following the path they've laid, but to put your own spin on it and chase your own passions?
Ah, such a great distinction, Lucas, that I don't want to be a second rate someone else, right? And you don't want to be a second rate someone else. But when you have a mentor, someone to kind of lay out a path for you, then you know that they're going to teach you values, they're going to make distinctions for you, but along the way you've got to, you know, you got to be who you are. And I think that's the most important. And people always say, well, be yourself, but a lot of times we don't know who that is. And that's why it's important. Why, you know, I got it right beside me, my journal, which is allows me, you know, I journal daily. I've spent my life, you know, I have, you know, a library full of journals of my life to allow me to go, okay, be in the question of who am I, and what's most important to me, and where do I want to go, and where am I headed, and what's my vision for my week, my month, my year, my life. And so always kind of charting that course. And I think when you do that, you know, just by default, you're going to be you, you know. And so be passionate about where you're headed, but yeah, just have that path and just know who you are and follow that path.
You mentioned journaling and how you've done that your entire life.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that I've kind of found as a commonality between great leaders and really successful people, is that taking that time to self reflect, get your thoughts down on paper, and being able to come back to those thoughts later in life and kind of see where your headspace was at that time. What are some tips or strategies that you've kind of found throughout your life of journaling that you would give to someone who may just be starting out?
I used to use a prompt, you know, prompts. So I would have some prompts like, what was the best part about today? What are three things that I learned today? It's a great way to get started. Now I journal from a place of what do I want to do today? And then when I'm done, I journal on what I did today. And don't get too hung up on, I've got a journal every day. But if you have it with you, right? If you always have, and I'm a big man, the written word is a big deal to me. You know, there's something really kinesthetic about the pen and the paper. Everybody's not like that. Some people will journal on their phones and that kind of stuff. I'm not as big a fan of that, just because of, I think your personality starts to come out when you start to write, and there's something really, really just, like I said, kinesthetic about it, and it's more reflective and you have it in your hands. But I would say that get a journal. And I used to use those composition books. And so I always had it in my backpack. And so if I was having a tough day, I would pull it out and I would journal it. And now I choose journals that I like the feel of it. I always have leather bound journals, and just because it's something that when you go to it, you feel good about going to it. And that's my recommendation: is you invest in the journal, and then you invest the time into the journal, and it's just something that you feel good about. It's a part of you. And there's no wrong way to do it. A lot of times sometimes I'll mind map. Do you know what mind map is? It's
Yeah,
put the
yeah,
main idea
definitely.
in the center. And sometimes if I have an idea, if I didn't do it for this, but oh, hey, Lucas is doing a podcast, and so I might in the center go the team leader, and then I might do a couple branches off of just things that I'm thinking about. And then when it comes time to have that conversation, that oh yeah, that's right, I had that thought. I knew you were going to be great at this, so I didn't worry about it too much.
Well, thank you. And you talked about journaling is something that you kind of get out the effort that you put in, and I know this ties directly into one of your main things in life
Yeah.
and that you preach on. So let's just dive right into that topic.
Well, journaling is a yoga whippy thing, and yoga whippy is the word. Yoga whippy, YOGOWYPI. I've shared it for the last 30 years. It's an 8-letter acronym, and each letter stands for word. It means you only get out what you put in. And when I back to my college days, I was in my 7th year of college, and a friend of mine says, I need to tell you something. And I was, what's that? He said, my first college class was philosophy 101. And the professor came into the classroom, and before he ever started his lecture, before he ever did anything, he just kind of peered over the top of his glasses, and he tells all of us, he says, I've been teaching this class a long time, and I know exactly what's going to happen before we even start the class. Some of you are going to move to the front of the room. You're going to get involved in my lectures. You're going to do the readings that I assign. And he said, you're going to get more out of this class than just a grade. He says, some of you are here because someone told you that you have to take philosophy 101 in order to graduate from college. You're here because you think somebody's making you be here. You're here because you want to get the grade. He says, I'm going to make a deal with you. If you're only here to get the grade, you can do whatever you want while you're in my classroom. You can sit in the back, you can read a book, you can listen to music, you can even sleep. But if you show up every single day, I'll guarantee you a C. Somebody raised their hand and says, excuse me, sir, you mean all I got to do is show up and you're going to give me a C? And the professor says, yeah, that's right. Someone else says, hey, what's the catch? And professor says, there's no catch. He says, you and I live in an amazing country that is filled with opportunities if you look for them. He said, in a place like this, if all you want to do is just get by, you're going to get by. You're going to be okay. You're going to survive. But I don't think that you're in college just to survive. You probably want to thrive. You want to make something with your life. So if you put a lot into it, you're going to get a lot out of it. If you invest, the returns are going to come. And that's the yoga whippy principle, is knowing that I'm investing my energy and effort into this because I know that I will grow. And for those of you who haven't read the book Growth Mindset by Carolyn Dweck, it's life altering if we start to think of things not based upon what am I going to get out of it, but based upon how am I going to grow. So no matter what, if I put in the energy and the effort, the immediate payoff for that energy and effort is always growth. It's always growth. If I fail, I'm going to grow. If I succeed, I'm going to grow. If I mess up big time, there's growth. Always looking at how am I going to be rewarded, but how am I going to grow? The growth mindset. So you probably heard about the growth mindset.
Definitely. It's something really cool to learn more about, and it does kind of change your way of looking at yourself in your life. And the more time I spend with you, I keep noticing one thing, and that's your ability of storytelling and how you incorporate that and weave it through your concepts and ideas that you kind of learned over the years. Can you explain the importance of storytelling and how it's such a great tool that everyone needs to learn?
Well, you think about the power of a story is that it engages the listener. We're all engaged by stories. My kids, when I put them to bed, It was, they wanted to hear a story. And sometimes they wanted to hear a story about me, or sometimes it was the cat in the hat. The sun did not shine. It was too wet to play. So we sat in the house on that cold, cold, wet day. It's so simple, a story. But when the scene is set for the story, it always engages us. There's a lot of talk out there about, story brand marketing, which is really wise stuff. For those of you who are interested in getting into marketing, learning to market through the stories, they engage us. And there's nothing more powerful than a well-told story. And we don't need Netflix and we don't need Hollywood to tell a great story. It's as simple as being intentional about how you're going to tell a story. I don't know what I've told, maybe 3 or 4 stories in this podcast so far. And when I tell the story, I'm always really intentional. And as you know, because you've attended my storytelling workshop, is that I never start a story by telling I'm going to tell a story, right? So I always, when I step into the story, like Dr. Seuss, the sun did not shine, it was too wet to play, right? You set the scene, you introduce the characters, and always within a story, there's always some kind of drama that happens. And the key thing about stories, as we're intentional about creating the story, is we want the character, or there's going to be an event where the character goes from being comfortable to being uncomfortable, right? So I sat there with Sally. I sat there with two. I said how I wish we had something to do. I looked and I saw him come in on the mat. I looked and I saw him, the cat in the hat, right? Something happens, right? Sally and I are sitting there, we're looking out the window, and boom, the cat comes in, the cat in the hat, and he's outrageous, and something happens. And so with all stories, there's some event that happens where we go from the comfortable to the uncomfortable, and it's in battling that uncomfortable, whether it's Bilbo Baggins trying to figure out who he is, Luke Skywalker, on the planet Tatooine, seeing the little, hologram of Princess Leia, knowing that I've got to get uncomfortable. Something has to happen. And it is the growth that happens on the journey that allows us to teach a lesson. And so usually when I tell a story, it follows that cycle. And then at some point there is a lesson. There's a lesson that is learned, a teachable moment where we can go, what about you? Have you ever been there? Have you ever been bored on a cold, cold, wet day? And what did you get out of that? And usually I like to incorporate a phrase that pays, which is, we can show up and get by. Question is, who wants to get by? Yoga Whippy, you only get out what you put in. It's about time, right? And the beautiful thing, there's a great podcast. It's called The Broken Record. The podcast is called The Broken Record, and it's an interview with Jason Isbell. I challenge all of your listeners, if you're interested in storytelling, listen to that from the place of the stories that are told. And there's a point in there towards the end of the podcast that if you wait for it, it'll blow your mind, because they're talking back and forth about the phrase that pays, having a phrase in a song that keeps being repeated over and over again. And the first time you hear it, it has a meaning, but the second time you hear it, it has a different meaning. The third time you hear it, you think, well, I've heard that phrase a little too much in this song. By the fifth time or sixth time, you're going, I want to hear that phrase some more, because you see the change over time. Like the concept, it's about time. We hear it and we say, oh, it's about time you showed up. But when you heard it the second time, when you heard it the third time, it's about time took on a whole different meaning. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish when I incorporate a phrase that pays. I know I went a long ways to get there, but when you tell a story, know why you're telling it. You're telling it so that you can create the lesson, create the thinking, create the moment where people are thinking about their lives. And because when I told that story, chances are when you heard those stories, when I was telling them, you weren't thinking about my story so much, but just automatically you're going, well, how does this apply to me as a human, right? And so that phrase that pays kind of brings it home, so it creates a memorable place so people can come back to it. Or every time they hear the phrase from now on, it's about time. See, right? I messed with you right there, right? Now, every time you hear it's about time, you're gonna stop and go, that's right. It is about time, right? That's the beauty of stories, is they come back over and over again. Yeah.
Working with thousands of students across your life, I'm sure that there has been a few aha moments that you've kind of had. And I want to discuss, what is it that you found distinguishes great team leaders from the good and ordinary team leaders? What is that one key element that transcends someone to the next level of excellence?
My initial thought is that they're just very present, right? They're very, very present. They live in the room that they're in, right? That's when we did that SOLA podcast, the Zoom meetings, which were fantastic, by the way. I went in with so much apprehension about can we accomplish our goals virtually? And you know as well as I do, when we were on the call, there were people like yourself, and there was Wyatt, and there was Zach, and there was Alexa, and these people who were interacting. They, even though we were separated by physical space, they were completely present in the room. And so here we are 2 weeks removed from that, and I remember those people because they were present, right? And so we go back to that thing. People always remember how you made me feel. Well, when I think back on that experience, that Zoom meeting, those people who interacted and jumped in and got involved and got engaged, they were present. And so they gave me a gift. They made me feel important. And you look at it and you go, yeah, those are not great team leaders. Those are great leaders. Those are great humans who have that ability to interact. Yeah. So I think that's it. I think it's presence.
That's great. That's great insight there. Bill, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on this podcast. We got a lot of great insight here into a lot of different topics. I just thank you so much for being on here.
Lucas, this went by so fast. Our time together.
It always does, and it ties back into time, the great intro that we had. Everything comes full circle.
It does. It does. You blew my mind right there. It was. So yeah, we brought up and we use this time wisely. And for those of you who are listening, use your time wisely, invest it. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill.